Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today let's talk about the famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. Aristotle 384 BC 322 BC. Aristotle is often referred to as the father of several fields due to his foundational contributions. He is the father of Western philosophy for shaping logic, ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology. He is the father of logic for developing formal logic and the syllogism. He is the father of political science for his systematic study of governments and the politics. He is the father of biology and zoology for his detailed empirical research on living organisms. He is the father of literary criticism for his work Poetics, which laid the groundwork for dramatic theory. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher and polymath, widely regarded as one of the most influential thinkers in Western history. A student of Plato and a tutor to Alexander the Great, he founded the Lyceum in Athens and wrote extensively in logic, metaphysics, ethics, politics, biology, and aesthetics. So remember, Socrates was the teacher of Plato. Plato was the teacher of Aristotle. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander the Great. Aristotle's empirical approach and a systematic reasoning laid the foundation for both the classical philosophy and the scientific tradition. Born in 384 BCE in Stagira, a city in Chalcidice, northern Greece. His father, Nicomachus, was a court physician to King Amyntas III of Macedon, who was the grandfather of Alexander the Great. This background gave Aristotle an early exposure to biology and the Macedonian court. At the age of 17, Aristotle moved to Athens to join Plato's academy, where he studied for 20 years. Aristotle was Plato's most brilliant student, but he disagreed with some of Plato's core ideas, especially about forms. After Plato's death in 347 BC, Aristotle left the academy, possibly due to disagreements and the leadership passing to Speusippus. After this, Aristotle spent time in Asia Minor and Lesbos conducting biological research. Around 342 BCE, he was invited by King Philip II of Macedon to tutor his son Alexander the Great. Aristotle tutored Alexander for several years and may have influenced Alexander's worldview and appreciation for Greek culture. Aristotle returned to Athens in 335 BC and founded his own school, the Lyceum. He conducted lectures, research, and wrote prolifically. Unlike Plato's idealistic teachings, Aristotle focused on empirical observation and logic. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, anti-Macedonian sentiment in Athens rose. Aristotle fled to Chalcis in Euboea to avoid persecution, saying he would not let Athens sin twice against philosophy. Referring to Socrates, Aristotle died in 322 BC at the age of 62. Major works of Aristotle also known as Corpus Aristotelicum. Aristotle's works are vast, covering logic, metaphysics, ethics, politics, poetics, rhetoric, natural science, and more. His first work, Organon, Categories on Interpretation, Prior Analytics, Posterior Analytics, Topics, Sophistical Refutations, Physics, that is about a natural philosophy. He explores changes, causation, motion, and the nature of time and space, and also introduces the concept of the four causes: material, formal, efficient, and final. The next work is Metaphysics. It investigates being as being, introduces the concept of substance, potentiality, and actuality, and the unmoved mover. The next work is De Anima, that is, on the soul. It discusses psychology and the nature of the soul, divides the soul into vegetative, sensitive, and rational parts. The next work is Ethics, that is Nicomachean Ethics, one of the most influential works. It is named after his son Nicomachus. The next work, Eudemian Ethics. The next work, Magna Moralia. And about this work, it is a disputed authorship. Develops the concept of virtue ethics, the golden mean, and the eudaimonia, that is, flourishing or happiness, as the highest good. The next work, that is Politics. It continues the ethical framework into the realm of society and the governance, compares different types of governments, that is monarchy, aristocracy, polity, etc. It emphasizes the role of the polis and the concept of man as a political animal. The next work, that is Poetics, is a foundational text in literary theory and a dramatic criticism. He defines tragedy, mimesis, that is imitation, catharsis, hamartia, and anagnorisis. The next work is Rhetoric. It's a systematic analysis of persuasion in speech. It outlines ethos, pathos, and logos as the three artistic proofs. The next work, History of Animals. The next work, Parts of Animals. The next one, Generation of Animals. The next work, Movement of Animals. This demonstrates his keen interest in taxonomy and biological classification. He dissected marine animals and developed a comparative anatomy. Now, the philosophical contributions of Aristotle. Logic and reasoning. Father of formal logic. He developed a syllogism and deductive reasoning. He differentiated between inductive and deductive reasoning. And his ethics and virtue theory. Ethics rooted in virtue rather than rules or consequences. He advocated the golden mean. That means virtue lies between two extremes. For example, the virtue of courage lies between recklessness and cowardice. Now Aristotle's metaphysics and ontology contributions. Substance theory. That means every being is a compound of matter and form. His concept of potentiality and actuality. Then the unmoved mover. That means a necessary eternal being that causes motion without being moved. Now Aristotle's contributions to politics and society. He advocated constitutional government as ideal, then emphasized the education and citizenship, believed women and slaves were naturally inferior, reflecting the prejudices of his time. Now Aristotle's contributions to aesthetics and tragedy. In his work Poetics, Aristotle defined tragedy as the imitation of an action that is serious and complete, producing catharsis. He laid a groundwork for modern literary and dramatic theory. Now Aristotle's legacy and influence. He is a founding figure of Western philosophy along with Plato and Socrates. His ideas dominated medieval scholasticism, especially through the works of Thomas Aquinas. He influenced Islamic philosophers like Avicenna and Averroes. His biological works remained authoritative until the Renaissance. His logic and syllogistic thinking became central to Western education for centuries. His classification of knowledge influenced the organization of curricula in medieval and modern universities. Now let's compare the observations of Plato and Aristotle. About forms, Plato said that it is abstract, ideal forms exist. Then Aristotle said forms exist in objects. About reality, Plato said there is dualism, there is world of forms versus world of senses. Aristotle said there is empiricism, there is knowledge from experience. About the soul, Plato believed that the soul is immortal and it's trapped in the body. Aristotle believed that soul is the form of the body. About the politics, Plato was in support to philosopher king. He said that philosopher king is the ideal one. But Aristotle said that mixed constitution is the ideal one. Now the difference in opinion about art. Plato distrusted mimesis or imitation, but Aristotle saw art as possible of creating emotional purification or catharsis. Aristotle invented a primitive version of the scientific method, while the modern scientific method was developed centuries later. Aristotle was one of the first to systematically use observation, classification, and hypothesis testing. In his biological studies, he dissected over 50 species of animals, creating meticulous records of their anatomy and behavior. He insisted that knowledge must be grounded in empirical data, not just deductive reasoning. There was a revolutionary stance in ancient times. This empirical orientation set him apart from Plato and influenced later scientists like Galen, Linnaeus, and even Charles Darwin. Most of Aristotle's surviving works were lecture notes. What we read today as Aristotle's books are not published philosophical treatises, but rather student lecture notes or teaching materials. These are often thus technical, and full of abbreviations and repetitions, likely transcribed by students at the Lyceum. His lost dialogues, written in more literary style, like that of Plato's, were praised in antiquity but are now mostly lost. This explains the sometimes difficult or fragmented style of his surviving corpus. Aristotle had a son named Nicomachus, who may have died young. The famous Nicomachean Ethics is named after either his son Nicomachus or his father, who was also named Nicomachus. Some ancient sources suggest Nicomachus was a student of his father, but he died in battle or young, which adds a personal dimension to the work. This raises the poignant speculation that the ethics may have been intended as a moral guide for his son. The work is filled with references to practical wisdom or phronesis and a living well, possibly for his family's future. Aristotle wrote a constitution for the city of Athens. Among his political works, Aristotle and his school compiled 158 constitutions of various Greek city-states. One, that is the Athenian constitution, survived on a papyrus discovered in the 19th century and is attributed likely to Aristotle or his students. It offers a detailed historical account of Athens' political development from monarchy to democracy. This text is invaluable for understanding ancient Greek political history and shows Aristotle's keen historical method. Aristotle believed the brain was a cooling organ, not the seat of intelligence. Despite its brilliance, Aristotle mistakenly believed the heart was the center of thought and emotion, and the brain's job was to cool the blood. This error persisted for centuries, influencing medical theory until corrected by Galen and a later scientific anatomist. He based this view on observation, noting that animals with larger brains were often less hot-tempered. The mistake is a fascinating reminder of how even genius can be bound by the limits of available evidence. Death and a final yes. Aristotle retired to Chalkis in Euboea in 323 BC. He died of natural causes, possibly a stomach illness, in 322 BC. He left behind a vast corpus and a school that influenced the intellectual history for over 2 millennia.